Hello, everybody. My name is Ray. Welcome to the Evangelical Dark Web. Today, we'll be talking about medical apartheid in the mega church. So, it's interesting the dynamic between mega churches and small urban churches in terms of their willingness to impose medical apartheid. That means different partial treatment for the vaccinated versus the unvaccinated, a separate class of believer or supposed believer, because again, any church enacting these things is a false church. Let's be honest about that language here. It's a false church. No euphemisms needed. So that said, you don't see a whole lot of mega churches participating in this dynamic. You do see a lot of like small liberal churches doing so, but you don't see a whole lot of mega churches doing that in the United States. Specifically, we're just talking about America for the time being. Obviously, in Canada, in the UK, you're going to be seeing a lot more of this, but in the United States, you aren't seeing a whole lot of it in the mega church. So that's what we'll be talking about today. So the most brazen example is Tim Keller. Tim Keller's church is the most brazen example of a prominent mega church in the United States enacting a medical apartheid. So his church is Redeemer Presbyterian Church in New York City. And Tim Keller is not the pastor of this church. He's since retired, but I imagine him retiring from Redeemer Presbyterian is kind of the same as Bill Gates retiring from Microsoft if he's done that. He's still going to have a major influence on the direction of that company and any conspiracies that need to be funded. So with that said, Redeemer Presbyterian Church is probably the most brazen example in the country of a prominent mega church enacting medical apartheid. So as we can see, Redeemer Eastside continues to revise, update, and in-person worship protocols based on the most recent federal and state guidelines and in collaboration with our host, Temple Israel. It's kind of odd to have a church hosted in a Jewish organization's building. Here are latest protocols implemented beginning Sunday, July 11th, and we will continue to live stream on our YouTube channel just as an alternative, I guess. So again, Evangelical Dark Web myself did not break this story. I believe the Daily Wire is who broke this story. Credit where credit is due. And it's funny, I saw an interview with the author of that article, and she kind of made it seem like no one was talking about these types of things. Now, Tim Keller, I guess she had a good source on who directed her to this, but otherwise, things like the International Mission Board was covered by outlets like Evangelical Dark Web and like-minded websites. So I just want to be clear that we are covering this issue. And I've definitely been harder covering the Branch Covidian influence on the church than, even the websites that I read. So, just a little bit different about the Evangelical Dark Web. So don't forget to check out that website and subscribe as well. That's my shameless plug for the moment. So individuals who are fully vaccinated, 2 weeks have elapsed since your final dose or single shot dose, are welcome to sit on the main floor of the sanctuary without social distancing, and mask will be optional. Pre-registration will be required, but no seat assignments will be made. Children under the age of 12 who are not yet vaccine eligible, but now they are, I think, and under the age of 16 who have not been able to be vaccinated may accompany and be seated with fully vaccinated parent. So only a parent. So a couple issues there. Obviously the medical apartheid system, because this church actually has a balcony. Not every church has a balcony, which I believe is one of the major reasons why a lot of these Branch Covidian cults aren't actually imposing this. Another reason is they're not actually back in-person worship. When I did my research on churches, prominent mega churches, a lot of the ones in the New York area were not actually back in person worship. So, and I wouldn't consider those mega churches. They definitely had some inflated membership counts. So let's be real about that as well. So the second issue is obviously the registration. So you have to sign yourself up on a list that will be handed over to the government, a contact tracing list, in order to attend that service. and that's just asinine. That's insane for believers in this environment to register to attend a worship service. That is insane. These people don't understand the times, or they do, and they're malicious about it. So that's another issue. And then the whole, this is going to require children under the age of 18. So 16 to 18 have to be vaccinated in order to attend. Under 16 is a little bit more loosey-goosey for the time being. And under 5 to 12 is not required at the time. So again, this will all go downhill as the definition of fully vaccinated changes and the ability to get vaccinated increases, because it's not going to stop. Individuals who are not fully vaccinated or desire to continue to wear masks and socially distance are welcome to sit on the balcony where there is more space to accommodate social distancing. Now, I have a feeling that this church is not very packed on a Sunday, so social distancing won't be a problem. I'm going to talk more about that phenomenon that I'm seeing in the coming week, as I am working on a breaking story that will expose a prominent megachurch. We will use a self-reporting honor system during the pre-registration process to indicate fully vaccinated status. So that's kind of stupid, but all right. So basically, they think that people won't lie about it, and that's a pretty reasonable assumption. If you're going to a Tim Keller church, odds are you aren't really conservative theologically. So with that said, you're also probably in a Branch Covidian cult, so you wouldn't do that either. So we got our cry room stuff being talked about, and just slowly re-implementing prior things. There will be a group going out for coffee after the service on select Sundays. See our calendar, and that's just they even call it a contact tracing list in order to attend. Like, that's ridiculous, that the fact that they would just hand over a list to the government. Like, I don't get that mentality of, first of all, I don't get the mentality of, I'm sick, let me get tested for something to tell me that I'm sick. I don't get that mentality. I did not grow up with that mentality. That mentality happened after swine flu is when that mentality began in American culture. You can look at that with the flu test data. But, prior to swine flu, people didn't get tested for the flu. Like, that was not a widespread thing. Like, if you got sick, you stayed at home and, your mom took care of you as a kid. You didn't get tested. Like, that became a thing, like, later on in the last few years, which did a very good job at conditioning us to get tested for things that we really don't need to be tested for. If we're sick, we don't need to get tested. And the fact that, there's only bad things that can come from self-reporting to the government, like being subject to contact tracing and the issues with that. So, as I wanted to point out, Redeemer Presbyterian Church is the most brazen in its vaccination apartheid, medical apartheid. The other example I want to point out is Saddleback Church. Rick Warren, who I believe is recently retired from Saddleback Church, which is an egalitarian Southern Baptist church. I just want to throw that under the bus. It'll be interesting to see if he gets kicked out of the Southern Baptist Convention. Certainly should, but I don't see that happening. So, with that said, they masks are optional for those who are vaccinated. So that means for those who are unvaccinated, masks are mandatory. For your comfort and safety, you're welcome to continue wearing a mask. Masks are still optional for children, which wasn't always the case. So if we look at their documents here, and I don't know why, they must have had a coding issue here. Masks are not required for under 2, but they required 3-year-olds to wear masks. Like, this is insane. Or a face shield, which is also pretty stupid. Like, this is some pretty messed up stuff. Rick Warren's a pretty evil guy. There's just no way to soften that. And Rick Warren was actually one of the only prominent Branch Covidian pastors that did not take PPP loans. Now, that could be because he has over 500 employees, so he actually wasn't eligible for these loans. But, just to note that. And Rick Warren also claimed, and I covered this in a previous video, that his church has actually been supremely improved, according to him. Like, his metrics have gone up because of his embrace of Branch Covidianism, which is not a trend that holds firm anywhere else that I'm seeing. So I believe that would be worth examining, but there's nothing biblical about imposing mask mandates on your congregation. That's completely unbiblical. Church leaders do not have the authority to bind the conscience of believers to do that. Church leaders cannot justify before a holy God putting a barrier to receiving the gospel. Church leaders cannot put a barrier on believers for receiving communion outside of that which Scripture has prescribed. For instance, if someone is unrepentant, I don't think it's wrong for a church elder to deny them communion. Like, that's completely in line with Scripture. The Catholic Church has that issue come up a lot, I guess. But there is no reason for you otherwise deny someone communion. And again, if someone's a professing believer, no reason to deny them baptism. You got to vet these things, of course. But again, masks are not a reason to deny someone the ordinances of the church. That's the key point that I'm trying to drive home. So that's pretty unbiblical. And again, the church has other functions like worship. You're saying that someone can't worship God unless they wear a mask? Just supremely unbiblical. And Rick Warren knows that, and I'm sure he... again, this isn't about safety. It's always about, let me embrace being like the world. And that's the key thing. If the church starts being like the world, and I think the data is showing that people are sickened by seeing their churches act like the world on this issue. They wanted their churches to stand up. Their pastors capitulated. Their pastors groveled to the government. And that sickens people. That sends a bad witness to the general population that this church doesn't take their faith seriously. Why should I take their faith seriously if they don't take their faith seriously? That's the message that this Branch Covidianism sends, and that's why it must be supremely rejected by the church. So Tim Keller is the most brazen example, and Rick Warren is the largest example. Not as brazen as Tim Keller's church, Redeemer Presbyterian Church, NYC, but Saddleback Church is definitely the largest example of a church implementing this type of system and stating as much. Everyone else, even the carnal mega churches, are basically having this policy optional because they don't want to turn people away. They even realize that it's kind of bad business to turn this away, even if they're carnal theatrical productions. But Rick Warren, nah. He's full bore with his Branch Covidianism. Tim Keller and his church, they're true believers in this nonsense. They've been pushing it on Gospel Coalition all over the globe, all over the English-speaking world. So, of course they're going to do it at home, right? So they've proven. So that's all I got to say about this issue for now. Definitely subscribe because we got more coverage on this issue. I think we're going to see some trends in the mega churches in the United States. And I got at least one church lined up, and maybe I'll find more churches to cover on this issue. So you're going to want to subscribe to the channel to keep in touch on that story, and also check out evangelicaldarkweb.org. And if you want to support this ministry effort, you can go to evangelicaldarkweb.org/join. And you can be a subscriber there as well. Comment below what you think about what I think, and I will catch you on the next one.